Hi, welcome to another episode of Cybersecurity Unlocked. I'm your host, Avion Jones. Today I'm joined by my good friend, Lloyd Brown. Lloyd works for FireEye as a cyber threat intelligence analyst. He's been there for just over 3.5 years. I'm going to talk to him about his career, how he made the switch from government to the private sector, and what the threat landscape looks like today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for coming down. It's great to see you. How has lockdown been treating you?
Interesting. It's always mentally tough, but a lot of Netflix, a lot of PlayStation 4.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So has this period been busier for you, or has it been quieter? I mean, I presume a lot busier.
Yeah, it has been much busier. As a lot of companies go to remote working, they have additional security issues that they may not have had before. And so we have been working to try to help address those with our customers.
Yeah. Okay. And have you had any sort of, I mean, a lot of people have been sort of reskilling and training and learning a new language. Have you done anything like that? Acquired any new skills or?
Beat a few new levels, continue to just read up on cyber threats because the landscape is just constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And so it's just consuming information day and night. And plus, being American, there's a lot of things that are going on at home. And so staying in touch with my family.
Yeah. It's we can come on to that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But yeah, things in the US are pretty crazy right now. So, what you graduated in 2004? What happened from 2004? Talk us through how you got your sort of big break.
Okay. So I kind of always covered computer related things, and I worked in University, South Carolina State University, a great institution. And so while I was there, in my junior year of university, a program reached out to me to help that focuses on hiring minorities into the government sector across all different agencies. And it's called NAFIO, the National Association for Equal Employment Opportunity in Higher Education. And so I became a NAFIO intern, and they placed me in the government. And then, so I interned in 2003 in Washington, D.C. And then in 2000, at the end of that internship, I was given a conditional offer for the government. So I completed my studies and then went into the government in 2004 and stayed for 11 years.
Okay, great. And what sort of skills did you sort of pick up in the government? Talk us through, so some of the, I guess, sort of roles as much as you're able to, of course.
Okay. So geopolitical security issues, a lot of people who are in this realm, and in addition to just cybersecurity, just security in itself is a mindset. And so you learn the mindset of things to understand, of what to question. And so that built my my foundation of just understanding the way that the world works with geopolitical events and how they can influence decisions that are made, and focusing that in security.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And this was obviously before it was kind of sort of trendy. So what year was this when you sort of?
So this is I think the 9/11 event that happened in the U.S. had an influence on. There was a surge in hiring and wanting more security related people, and so I was one of those hires that was influenced by the events that happened.
Yeah.
And I think that at least in the United States brought into context a lot more focus on security. What can we be doing proactively to prevent another tragedy like something that happened?
Yeah. Okay, of course. And then what was it that made you sort of switch to the private sector? I mean, this is something I'll be keen to sort of talk to you as well in some detail, because making that switch from government, whether it's US or any sort of European countries or Australia, China, it's always going to be difficult to kind of make that switch into the private sector. So talk us through, I guess, your sort of journey.
Okay.
And how you did that.
So after working in the government, eventually I got a position in the embassy here in Singapore. And so then I did my time at the embassy, but while working there, I was exposed to a lot more of the private sector and just understanding life just outside of the government. And so then after staying in the government for 11 years, I realized that it was something that I would like to kind of pursue and just figure out and try private life. a lot of times there's always an option that you can go back to the government, whether it be contract or try to get rehired by another government institution or agency. But I figured that since Singapore is a city state and it's very easy to meet people here, that it may be something that I would like to pursue. And so I felt like it was a good place with a lot of people who had a high concentration of wealth and opportunity in a small area, and that it's easy to develop a good network. I developed a pretty good network while working at the embassy. And so I wanted to try to make an attempt at it since I understood and had already been a part of this here before I attempted to go back to Washington, D.C. and just continue to work in the government.
Yeah, yeah. And how did you, because a lot of the work that you, well, the skills that you acquired and the nature of the job that you did, it was very difficult to kind of put that into a resume or CV and then sort of, you know, I guess sort of demonstrate that to a prospective employer. So how did you go about sort of demonstrating that and demonstrating your capabilities? Because it was quite a difficult journey, wasn't it, when you were kind of, you know, before you sort of landed that big job?
It took 2 years in order to finally land the big job,
Wow.
which was a very long, painstaking journey. But I'm very glad I did it. But it was, you're right, it's hard to translate those skills, or at least to explain those skills to a private employer. There's not much value that they actually, in general, put on it or understood about it. And it eventually took getting connected with people who were in the network and understand and essentially speak the language that I spoke from the government before I started to get breaks and opportunities. And so if your CV is coming across a general HR desk, they may not actually understand the value behind what the capabilities that I have. And so without getting into an event where I could actually have a sit down drink with somebody or a networking event where I could explain to things a bit more, it was hard to translate that and get past the general hiring process. And essentially I ended up having to go around HR and using the network to get in contact with people who understood the industry, and they were able to help me network into an opportunity.
Sure. So what would you do? Because I think there'll be a lot of people as well potentially listening that might be going through sort of a similar journey or thinking about making a switch to the private sector. So is there anything that you would do differently knowing what you know now when you were looking to make that switch from the government into private sector?
Yeah, I think that it would have been very beneficial to kind of plug into the right network. I did make some network contacts, but the timing was not right, and it depended on the market at the time as well. But I think having the right network would have helped. And so there are different cybersecurity focused groups that could be regional and global, and making those kinds of contacts with people who understand the language and the skill set that I had from the government would have definitely helped a lot more and shortened my journey.
Yeah. Which because there's so many like focus groups out there and cyber groups and associations and a lot of people keynote speaking. Which ones do you particularly rate, and all the ones that you've met, you would maybe give them a bit of a shout out?
So a lot of it can depend on what regions that you are located in. There may be regional ones, but the U.S. Embassy usually runs a security working group, depending on where the embassy is located, where you can meet a lot of people who are in the security industry. And like in particular in Asia, there are security groups like ACSG that are security focus groups where you come in contact potentially with people who speak the same kind of security language.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So whenever I call you, it's always quite refreshing because I know that you are somebody that genuinely loves your job, and you're always you're wax lyrical for hours on end about your job, and I think it's really refreshing. So tell us about the job that you do today.
Okay. So I am a cyber threat intelligence analyst for FireEye, and we help provide intelligence, and in my role, I help provide intelligence to the 4 different parts of the organization. And so Mandiant Intelligence, where we focus on everything from cyber physical to hacktivist activity to nation state actors or advanced persistent threat actors, APT groups, to financially motivated activity, to information operation and influence campaigns, to vulnerability reporting, And so we either provide those in detail to particular customers or create custom intelligence products and briefings on particular topics. And so that's the Mandiant Intelligence side. But then also I have the opportunity to provide help to Mandiant Consulting side when they are doing red team activities, and maybe provide them with intelligence on threat actors and how they may target a particular customer that they're working with. Things like MITRE ATT&CK framework, familiar tactics, tools, and procedures, or TTPs. And then also helping provide intelligence during active investigations, which is a constant pipeline. The Mandiant Consulting, especially in the region, they're always doing investigations.
Yeah.
And then there's also Mandiant validation, and so formerly known as Veridin, where we can actually take a look at a network and then imitate threat actors on how they would target a network, and then find security holes and help them plug that. And so we can provide intelligence with that as well. And then also our Mandiant managed security operations, so our SOC operations, we're watching customers globally, worldwide. And so when they're protecting customers and they may find a particular piece of malware or information, do we know more about it? What information can we have to help provide the customer on it? And so also helping contribute there. And then also teach cyber intelligence foundations, which is one of our courses that we offer to clients to teach them about attribution, to teach them about analysis, and where that may fit in an organization's security posture.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Cool. And how do you keep up to date with, I mean, the job that you do obviously keeps you kind of up to speed with the latest threat actors, but is there anything you do sort of outside of that in terms of, following, any particular organization? How do you keep up to date with the latest threat actors?
And so we're fortunate. We constantly have analysts that are publishing new analysis all the time. And so every day reading just the things that we publish internally and talking to the different parts of the company to try to understand the cybersecurity landscape from what we see, but then also consuming outside intelligence. And so there may be information that, based off of visibility, anybody who works in intelligence understands that you are limited to your visibility. And so somebody, another competitor or another organization or another government may have information that we don't have access to. And so consuming that as well. And then focusing on geopolitical things that are happening in the world constantly, 24 hours, reading and consuming news and data and information in order to understand the shift in the threat landscape and to help use our intelligence to predict what may happen next and protect our customers before threats happen.
Yeah, yeah. And how have you seen, I mean, this is probably a two-part question, but I mean, how have you seen the sort of threats evolve just during your time in the private sector working for FireEye over those, sort of the last 3 to 4 years?
So there are a few things have happened. A lot more, there's been a blurring of the line that initially didn't exist between financially motivated threat actors and their capabilities in nation states. And that's happened in two ways, where a lot of financially motivated threat actors have become more sophisticated. And then a lot more nation states have started to use off-the-shelf products in order to help blend in. And so it becomes harder to predict. And then we've also seen a shift of heavy zero-day usage, which used to be seen as the way to judge whether a group is sophisticated, to how quickly they can exploit a vulnerability. So if something is announced as a vulnerability a week ago, there are some threat groups that can already start using those vulnerabilities immediately. And so it takes a lot of focus and a lot of skill in order to do that. And so that's where we started to judge sophistication. And then also watching ransomware groups and how the ransomware threat landscape evolved, which may be like the number one threat today, where groups previously would just deploy ransomware and maybe lock up systems. And now we're seeing groups take that data, so they're exfilling data from customers or from organizations, and then maybe auctioning off the access to that information, access into the network, in addition to asking for a ransom for extortion from organizations. And now they've evolved to name shaming them. And so they now have created websites where they'll upload the data from those organizations if they don't pay. And then that generates a lot of publicity in the press. And then so as soon as organizations go out in the press, it's actually showing other threat groups that it's possible to do these same types of extortion activities. And then it's increased threefold. So even every week, just to our customer base, we publish reports on tracking different types of ransomware operators and who they've name shamed on their websites.
Wow. Oh, that's really fair. Well, what tends to be the most common sort of objective of our adversaries?
Depends on who you're looking at, and so you may have financially motivated threat actors who are just finding as many ways to monetize the money and the access that they have. And I think people still need to realize that they also are dealing with criminals, and criminals may be telling the truth or they may be lying.
Yeah. And
so the financially motivated threat actors. Then you have your APT groups or your nation state groups. And so common ones from Russia to China. We also have APT-32, which is Vietnam, Iran. You have all of these kinds of groups that are focusing on organizations, and they either want to steal data that they find or potentially just maintain access in the network. And the way that you can understand what they may be interested in is this information published openly online, information that they've disclosed on their goals and what they'd like to accomplish and achieve. And that gives you an idea of who they may go after and who they may target.
Yeah.
And then a very popular one is influence, an information operations campaign where they will they'll use things such as like deep fakes, fake Twitter, fake Facebook accounts, and they push out a narrative that supports what the message that they would like to get across. And they can do these with bots and large networks of accounts. There have been public disclosures from groups like Facebook and Twitter that we've also helped out, where they've seen 150, 170,000 accounts just being used to amplify messages or to push narratives. And so it's important that when anybody checks this information that they find more than one source because of that. But we can see where they've generated fake images and there are glitches in the images, or where we've seen things posted all within the same 10 seconds across 5 different accounts.
Right.
And so there are ways that we can track that.
And that's how you detect it, whether the same message is being pushed out on so many kind of Facebook accounts or Instagram accounts, and they're all sort of pushing that kind of same message, and you go, right, okay, this is, and that you see that a lot happening in various different countries that are trying to influence, sort of presidential elections or stuff like that.
Yeah. So elections, after the incidents that happened in the U.S. in 2016 with the Russians pushing out information and narratives in our elections, essentially gave out a playbook to other countries to do the same thing.
Right.
And so they can do this in different ways on how they're handling things internally. They can do it against their own citizens. They can do it for international relations.
Yeah.
And there are even private companies that have been known to do these kinds of operations. So a government pays a company located in a different part of the world, and they push out these narratives.
Yeah.
And it's probably, in addition to the ransomware, it's one of the most interesting things to track, because you don't know what news is real and what news isn't.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of a few episodes of House of Cards. Do you watch a lot of like the government kind of based shows?
Yeah, it's interesting to show where to take a look at these shows and see where they may have had like help or consulting or accurate or inaccurate.
Yeah, I was going to say, which one, in your opinion, is like the most accurate of the ones you've seen?
I think different shows cover different elements of that. I mean, you have everything like House of Cards that covers geopolitical issues, and a lot of these are time or use information from the times that they are on. And so like Homeland, I think that just finished, but that covered many different regional issues. You even have things as simple as like Madam Secretary that may have covered geopolitical issues at the time. The Americans is another really good show.
Yeah, great show.
Yeah, that covers, and it's just nice to look at a lot of the history behind it, because a lot of that, the way that countries focus on certain issues, they don't really change that much over time. The tactics change, but the objectives stay the same.
Yeah. It's with watching that show, it kind of reminds me of a little bit of like the time that we're in now. It's almost like we are kind of at war, but there's we just don't really know about it. It's almost kind of, I guess the only thing that would be different now is technology, of course, and social media and all those kind of elements.
Which is kind of why cybersecurity is the natural evolution in the realm to like focus in on, because it is clearly not going away. Organizations are more reliant. It's completely changed the threat landscape of how countries do their operations. And before, there's military objectives or there's espionage objectives where they would put people on the ground, and now a lot of it can just be done behind a keyboard. And it's like, how do you build those kinds of skills? Maybe you try to look into some of the certifications or the course that we offer to help understand and get a foundation behind it. But a lot of it is in addition to having technical skills in the cybersecurity realm, is also having a mindset. And I think the mindset is just as important, if not even more important than a lot of the technical skills, because you can pull a lot of that information and that data out, but if you can't explain it to an executive or an organization and explain why they should change their security posture in a certain way, then you just have a lot of information. And that's what intelligence is. It's data with context.
Yeah. What do you think, in your opinion, companies need to do to be better prepared or better protected?
They need to constantly examine their threat landscape and understand the different fields and realms that they work in. So if it's a global organization and it happens to be in 15 countries, understand what's happening in those particular countries. And then also looking at who may target those organizations in those countries. So you could have sophisticated groups that are nation state and it's part of a country's geopolitical reasons to focus in on that government or that industry or that business. Or you could just have opportunistic threat actors who are just constantly scanning different organization websites and looking for vulnerabilities. And so some of it can be opportunistic, some of it can be focused. And so by understanding the most common threat landscapes, for example, if a piece of ransomware tends to use one specific type of vulnerability and let's say Microsoft Office, then understanding that this is being used and exploited heavily and making sure that systems are up to date, that they're patched, and that you plug those security holes. And then you also need to have intelligence analysts and like security operations centers employees who understand what's happening and can weed through a lot of the noise and provide context on the information that you have. And a lot of times you'll see things in the media where they put a focus on information and they kind of push out a message saying that everything is broken, everybody's in danger. But if you actually have an intelligence analyst who understands what's happening, they can help put into context that it may not be as serious as a lot of the media portrays. And we do a lot of reaction and commenting on media. Every day we push out a product where we comment on things that are in the media and help give our rating on whether it's on target or maybe it's off target or it's possible that something happens, because there's so much publicity behind companies pushing out these kinds of messages.
Do you think companies today, do you think they underinvest in cybersecurity? Do you think there's
Definitely do. And I know that security tends to be one of the first thing that that gets cut when companies are looking at reducing staff and saving costs. And as a security person, you try to understand also, especially in the private industry, which is much different than the government, the funding that is behind that. Sometimes you just need people. Sometimes you need to upgrade technology and equipment, and all of that costs time and money. But the repercussions that could happen if an organization doesn't focus seriously on security can end up being reputational damage. It could result in lawsuits. It can result in lost revenue. It can result in embarrassment. Especially with things like ransomware and public naming of these companies. Now suddenly somebody's security position and is at risk because their data has been taken and published publicly on a website, and the news media has gotten a hold of it. And so then shareholders are asking questions, executives are asking questions. And so a lot of this can be preempted without having to pay out millions of dollars and suffer millions of dollars in reputational damage if you just hire and actually put an emphasis on security, then no news is good news, and threats are stopped before anybody or anything happens.
Yeah. Because I guess that's always going to be the difficulty in getting investment is, the cost. It's going to cost us this much. It's going to have this much effect on our profit. But if you kind of almost kind of reverse that and go, well, if this does happen, this is going to have a damning effect on our, share price. It's a direct link, monetary link. So it does, I guess, surprise me that, the companies do still kind of underinvest in cyber.
It's like people who keep lawyers on retainers. It doesn't mean that you like wait until
exactly. It's a really good example.
It's like you have a lawyer just in case something happens. Same way with cybersecurity, you have it in place just in case, and then it ends up paying off when one industry gets hit, and then next thing you know, you hear about 3 other competitors or organizations in the same industry, and you look at how much money they've lost because they didn't properly invest, and you're like, thank goodness we didn't have to deal with that because we invested on the front end in cybersecurity.
What do you, in your opinion, in terms of skills, are becoming increasingly in high demand at the moment, and what is becoming more sort of obsolete?
I think you always need a human element of it. Everybody's trying to automate things, but you're still going to need a person. And a natural evolution would be like to start with the building slowly a SOC operations, and then after that, evolving more to having intelligence analysts who can help feed in the SOC operations. Incident response is also becoming a very big thing in red teaming as well, in order to try to help predict things that are going to happen or respond to them when they do happen within organizations. Seeing a trend now where I think Tiber that's being used in the EU, where they're using threat intelligence, and this is another service that we offer too, to help in conjunction with red team operations.
Okay.
And so we can say that a group such as Fin 11, which is one of our newest groups, is focused on an organization and what kind of tactics have we observed them using, and then we can give that to a red team, and the red team can use the same tools and techniques that those groups did and mimic, and so an organization would actually know whether they could defend or not against those. And so that's another trend that's happening. Everybody is trying to automate, but you still need people to triage it because there's so much noise that comes out.
So red team, blue team, threat intelligence, pretty much all the same stuff. Cyber assurance and risk quantification.
I don't know if we do as much in the cyber risk. Cyber insurance is definitely a thing that people are looking at and into, but the same money that you could invest in that, you could also invest in having cybersecurity analysts. It's like an on-person insurance policy to help at least lower the risk. Our CEO Kevin Mandiant has said it's a matter of how you react when you actually get hit, because everybody is eventually going to get hit, but how much you triage and how much you handle those incidents when they occur is what really, really matters in the end of the day.
And what's next for you? What do you see as your kind of next move in your career, the next 3 years, 5 years? You clearly love what you're doing now, but I guess the natural progression would be to move into some sort of management.
I think the natural evolution is to move into a manager role and help teach others to the skill sets and the information that I have, and help guide and figure out different ways where we could expand growth. We're still, and that's another difference from the government versus private sector. You realize like a lot of it's around revenue, and you still need to find different ways to make money and be creative ways to make money. And so to be able to have flexibility and creativity, and just FireEye is excellent at that. It just, if you see an opportunity and you can explain and justify it, just go do it. Just go create it, go spend time on it. And so in this role that I'm in custom intelligence, it's just everything is bespoke products, which is kind of where a lot of intelligence is moving towards, where people want something created exactly just for them. And so taking these kinds of opportunities and expanding it and finding creative ways to use intelligence and to help provide support to customers, I think that would be like a nice natural evolution, because this is where the real fun is, chasing bad guys and finding ways to stop them before they can do harm to organizations.
Tell me about the APT 41 report.
Okay, so APT 41 is a group out of China. the state-sponsored Chinese activity. And you can download the entire report. It has tons of information. It has IOCs in it on our FireEye website. And so we call it Double Dragon because this is a group where they've been around for years and years, and we could see them doing nation-state activity, but then also in their spare time, we could see them doing financially motivated activity. And so this likely indicates some sort of like contractor type status where as long as they do their mission for the government, that they can do things in their spare time. But very active. We still continue to see this group today. They still continue to look into investigations, and there's no real incentive for them to change behavior because in the cybersecurity threat landscape, there's no real punishment for getting caught and for being called out. And then we also have another group, so we just graduated another group called Fin 11 or Temp Warlock. This group has overlap in the public that's known as like TA 505, and this is a financially motivated group. We've also watched this group evolve over time, where they started out with spamming campaigns and large volumes, sending out thousands and thousands of emails, to even going into ransomware these days. And then it just highlights the weakest link in general security is always, it's going to be a phishing email.
Right.
Because a lot of companies want to focus and make sure, and it is equally important on vulnerabilities, making sure the systems are secure. But a lot of times it just takes one click of an email. And so since it's easy and it's low entry, we see everybody constantly doing phishing email campaigns. And so you can download things offline, low bar of entry. Some of the business email compromises, they continue to happen. There are groups that we've tracked even out of Nigeria. The whole business email campaign is constantly still going on. And we can see how they operate, and it's just things you can download off the shelf.
Right.
And so it's made it easier for common threat actors, even hacktivists, in order to engage in cyber activity. It's low sophistication, but it's high reward once organizations are compromised.
Highly effective. Which, in your opinion, if you're able to share this, like sort of nation or country is like the most advanced from a cybersecurity perspective?
In general, like defense is the hardest.
Yeah.
And so almost everybody's vulnerable to defense. There are countries that are really good at offensive campaigns, which are the traditional ones that everybody knows about, but defense is tough. And so as smaller markets start to emerge more and focus on cybersecurity, then their defensive measures start to get stronger.
Yeah.
And so like Singapore is a great example because they created the cybersecurity agency, and they realized that this is something that needs to be focused on, and they continue to emphasize partnerships and focus resources. And so this is like a good example of like the emerging to getting a good baseline standard. In the U.S. there's constant activity, and so you can see the U.S. and EMEA having strong security postures, but Southeast Asia and Asia in general, they are starting to build that because there's so much money and information, and there's a lot of economic growth in this region that a lot of organizations are realizing they need to focus a lot more on cybersecurity.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Which what does the future look like for cybersecurity? It doesn't, like you mentioned before, it doesn't seem like it's going to be going away anywhere soon, and companies are going to continue to need to invest in cyber. What do you see as what's it going to look like in 2022 or 2024?
Right now, we do general predictions, at least of the company, and we predict things every year, and we release that also online. Ransomware doesn't look like it's going to go away. If the threat landscape and there a partnership and there was a way for different countries to actually punish threat operators, and that happens to a certain extent with like Interpol, and there are ways to arrest people that are caught, and that information keeps being put out in the public, that may change or shift at least the cybersecurity landscape, where now people know that they can actually get caught for what they're doing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when it comes to the nation states, it tends to be down to diplomacy and maybe economic sanctions in order to try to deter some of this behavior. And so that activity, and even when it comes down to diplomatic and military aspects as well, that will continue endlessly until the end of time. The second oldest profession is espionage.
Yeah.
And so that won't change at all. As new things like people will be focused on different like apps. So things like Instagram or TikTok are out. There'll be a focus heavily on whether those apps are vulnerable, whether there's information that's being absorbed or being exposed by that. And then 5G is another huge one, whether there are security flaws in 5G. It comes out of China, and do we use that to set up our infrastructure over the next 10 to 20 years? And so there will continue to be a focus on that as well. But as things continue to go online, it will become easier for a lot more common, just regular financially motivated threat actors to understand how to use these tools, and they'll continue to grow in sophistication.
Okay, cool. You don't subscribe to any of the 5G conspiracy theories then that have been sort of floating around?
No government has outright said that they had proof, but no government would want to reveal that information for just intelligence reasons.
Yeah, of course.
But it is definitely something to like examine and to look at, because if I'm any kind of threat actor and I can get to a pipeline of the data that comes into your country, then it's the ultimate win, and I can just pull information whenever I want. And so it's worth investing and looking into. And we also even look at that also as a company as well for customers.
Okay. What's your sort of take on conspiracy theories? Do you follow any of them, or do you subscribe to any?
Not really, because if I can't find good, like, the value of the source of information, or having more than one source behind these conspiracy theories, if I can't find that, then nothing's 100%. But low, medium, high confidence, I need a lot more information before I start believing a lot of the theories.
Well, I guess that's just your makeup, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming down. It's great talking to you. I could literally talk to you for hours, but I appreciate you've got to shoot off. But it's great to see you, and maybe hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Cheers.
Cheers.